Hey everyone, let's wrap up June and let's start off addressing the fact that there weren't any videos in June. In the beginning of the month, I didn't feel it appropriate to make just a normal booktube content video, but I also didn't want to make a video about the Black Lives Matter and American politics and the heinous murder of George Floyd, because do you really need a white German lady to tell you that that is bad and comment on it and that Black Lives Matter? I don't think so. There were a lot of other videos that your time was better spent on. I also didn't want to comment on the diversity and booktube discussion again. We've talked about this a lot in the community and on my channel. A few years ago, I stopped tracking detailed information about books and authors because for me, I decided I'm a mood reader. I want to read what I feel like, and I don't want my reading to become a sort of ticking off boxes. I didn't want to do background checks on authors anymore to see if they could fit one of the boxes that I arbitrarily set myself to read. For me, reading diversely is reading different kinds of stories from different kinds of authors. And if it doesn't happen and you feel the need to force yourself, okay. If you feel like you need an arbitrary goal to reach whatever goal you set yourself, perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think the discussion we always have about reading diversely on BookTube is helpful, because either you do it or you don't. Either you want to do it or you don't want to do it. And whatever we make in a video about it, it doesn't change anything. Personally, I'm quite okay with how diverse my reading is. And that's the important part for me, that I'm okay with my reading. So that deals with the lack of videos in the beginning of June. But then I tried making videos and I just couldn't. Life and work and everything was just getting too much that every time I sat down to make a video, I was incoherently rambling and didn't make any sense. So I decided my letter to June is the only video you're going to have this month, which is okay, I think. I'm allowed to take a break. My channel, my rules, I can do whatever I want. So let's get into the books. I finished reading 100 Years of Solitude. I read the German edition, I started it years ago, put it aside, started it again, and I really had to make myself push through this book because I didn't really like the writing. I kept wondering why everybody says it's such a great novel, because it's not a lot of fun to read. But there's always a but. Once you think about what he's doing, it is an okay read. I still don't think it's worth all the praise it gets. The story is basically centered around this one place. I forgot a lot of names and places, so this is going to be vague. But we follow this one place in South America, which has been founded by a family and a group of people, and then we follow a lot of these people and basically this one family of the founders and the characters in the family. A lot of these people through the generations keep having the same names, and it's repetitive what they do. And this is the thing I think he wanted to achieve, to show how history repeats itself, how things don't change that much. Even if the surrounding change, the idea and people and characters stay the same. So you have a lot of people who have similar character traits, similar interests, similar ways of being, and it would have been nicer if he hadn't told you all the time. Sometimes I felt I would like to discover this instead of you telling me this is what I'm doing. And that's something about the writing I didn't like. I also didn't find the characters captivating. A lot of them were kind of weird. I don't know. I finished it. I'm happy that I finished it. I think it's a book that you can really invest time to study and analyze. But reading for fun, I wouldn't recommend. The only other physical book I read this month was a German nonfiction, Deutschland, schwarz, weiß, which is addressing the situation of being Black in Germany and racism in Germany. And I thought this was super interesting. I recommend reading a local book about racism, not about racism in America if you're not American. So for me as a German, I have a good idea about racism, I thought. And as everyone in Germany, I think I'm not a racist, but I really liked how the author addressed what that actually means, racism in Germany, what we think racism is and what we don't think racism is. And we need to rethink that. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the writing style. I also enjoyed that at the beginning of the book especially, she addresses the fact that while reading, you're probably wanting to deny everything. You want to block it out. And she keeps addressing it and saying, it's uncomfortable, deal with it, it's life. And I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the facts about history, how we got there, and addressing the things that we don't know we do. Some of those I was aware of from readings I have done before. Others, I didn't know why I did that. But she addressed the fact, for example, that something she says, which is true, is that when we think of being German, we think of white Germans. I know there are more people that are German and have the German nationality, but when I think of German, I actively have to make myself consider that it's not only white people. And that is a problem. And I think that is something that we actively have to work against. But that is also something that we learn subconsciously as in childhood. I also finished 2 short ebooks. One I really liked, one I didn't. The one I didn't like is The Country of Pointed Furs. This is basically a classic. I think it was 1880 or something, somewhat over 100 years ago in Maine. And it's about a small town or area in Maine, a coastal area, and we have the author visiting and writing more short story style about her summer there, the people she meets, the people who lived there, the area, some of the history and the characters. And it could have been interesting, but something about the writing didn't gel with me. It was very weird because sometimes I thought there were the most beautiful sentences, and then there were random sentences again. Sometimes I felt that the sentences lacked proper transition. There was a mix of very long sentences and very short sentences. And somehow the writing didn't flow for me. I think if you are interested in the area and the time and you want to have a real good look how life was from a contemporary point of view, this would be a very good read. But for me, it was just a little bit boring. The other book was a Japanese classic, Snow Country, which is set 1950, 1960. And it's about a young man going to a mountain village in the snow country and visiting a geisha. And it's about the relationship between those two. And we see a lot about the country and the life there, but also a lot about their relationship and how it is kind of weird and not really from the man's point of view, but from the geisha's point of view, how hurtful and painful it is. But we also have to consider that the man who's married and has a family in Tokyo, who comes to the snow country to see the geisha, is not promising anything. It's part of the culture of being a geisha. And I liked how it was. I liked this narration. I liked the portrayal of the characters. I liked the look into their lives. It's also under 200 pages and it read much more easy and much more beautiful than the other book. I can highly recommend it. The rest of the books I listened to on audio. The first one was a nonfiction, The Power of Habit. I read this or listened to this years ago. And since I started June with the intention of building up some new habits around work and also around the whole situation, I thought, why not refresh my motivation and ideas on habits? And I remembered this is one of the first books I read about habits, and I really liked it. And it's still true. I liked how precise and helpful the advice given is, how it's personally connected to his life, but also addressing the overall facts and background knowledge we have about habits. So it was a motivational read, it helped, but then life happened and it didn't do anything in June. So A Tale of the Time Being took me a little to finish, mostly because I couldn't focus. So this book was intense. It has a lot of tough topics on bullying and abuse, and I couldn't sometimes deal with it properly, and I needed to pay attention. The writing was beautiful. The narration in the audiobook is wonderful. And it's a dual story. We have a woman in Canada who found a diary, reading the diary, and we have the story of the diary, of the character in the diary. And it's alternating. The story of the diary is a young girl in Tokyo, and she used to live in America, but when she moved back and had to go to high school, she ended up being bullied, and seriously bullied, by her classmates, and talked about that. So this book gave you an insight into Japanese culture, also story writing, and it plays with the notion of time and connectedness. And I really enjoyed that. Towards the end, there was a lot about quantum physics, where you really have to concentrate to try to follow what's going on. It does have magical realism in it, so if you don't like that, maybe that's not for you. But I loved it. Then I read Time of Contempt, the fourth book in the Witcher saga, or the second, depending on how you count. If you include the first two short story collections, it's the fourth book. If you start with the long form epic narration, it's the second. And I enjoyed being with the world again. I enjoyed being with the characters, but I discovered what I like about the series, and that's the characters and their relationships with each other and their dealings with each other. What I'm less interested in is all the side characters, all the politics and intrigue going on. Sometimes I get lost in all the words and where we are right now, because it's different locations and it's epic fantasy. But I don't care. I like the parts that I like. I think the audiobooks are well done. I like how they are made, and I like the voices. I like The Witcher. So I'm slowly going to continue with that. But I must say I preferred the short story style of narration, because it was short adventures which focused around The Witcher and not the overall politics of the world. Does that make sense? I hope so. The last 4 books I listened to were spread out over the months. It were the first 4 novellas in the Murderbot Diaries again, because I had trouble focusing on the other books, and I kept switching back to those to fill the time while I was walking, to calm down, and just to listen to something that I know I like and feel comfortable in. If you still don't know, the Murderbot Diaries are about a security unit that's a human bot construct who destroyed their governor module, which is controlling them. And it's sort of rogue, but discovers that it's making friends, trying to figure out what it wants, and going through adventures. I love it. You probably know that already. I'm currently listening to Network Effects, so yeah. And that was my month. I read good books, I read bad books, I read interesting books, I read challenging books. I had a lot of stuff going on with everything else, and I want to hear what you're doing. How is your reading? How is your mental state? Did you feel June was exhausting and never ending as well? I don't know. I hope you're fine. Stay safe, and let's talk in comments. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.